So there was an announcement recently with Capital One and changes to their lounge access. And for the most part, it wasn't a positive announcement. Capital One is going to be doing changes very similar to what American Express did to get access to their Centurion Lounge. Because of this announcement, there have been a lot of people on the internet who have been angry, talking about how they're going to get rid of the Capital One Venture X card. So now in this video, I'm going to go over why the Capital One Venture X card is still worth it and why people are overblowing these changes that have recently happened. Now I know that you probably have already seen a bunch of videos of people discussing the changes to the Capital One Venture X card. But what I'm going to talk about in this video is why this was an inevitable thing that was going to happen for anyone who's paying just a little bit of attention to the world of lounge access and traveling through airports. Now I'm a solo traveler, so you could say that these new changes don't really affect me, and that's the reason why I don't care very much, which is partially true. But when this card first came out, I saw how great it was and how much attention it was getting, and immediately people had discussions of how they could take full advantage of the lounge access. So for me to go over the changes, I first need to talk about how the Capital One Venture X card currently is with this lounge access. So right now, the Capital One Venture X card is arguably the best card to get a large group of people into lounges. Now I say arguably because technically the Ritz-Carlton card has the ability to bring unlimited people into lounges that they are partnered with, but I don't know how much people have tested this unlimited number, so I would say that the Capital One Venture X card is above the Ritz-Carlton card if you want to get a large group of people into lounges. Because how the Capital One Venture X card works is that if you want to go to, say, a Capital One lounge, you can bring in 2 guests. But you also can give out authorized user cards for no annual fee, and those authorized users can also bring in 2 guests. So say you happen to have the Capital One Venture X card yourself, and also your wife happens to have the Capital One Venture X card. That means that you'd be able to bring in 2 people, and she also would be able to bring in 2 people, and you're only paying for just the one Capital One Venture X card that's in your wallet. But say you decide to have 3 authorized user cards because you want to give your wife an authorized user card, and also your brother an authorized user card, and also your cousin you barely ever talk to an authorized user card. Well, if you all met up at the airport for a family trip, you could be bringing in a total of a dozen people to the Capital One lounge just from having one Capital One Venture X card. That is pretty insane. All the other premium travel cards made you pay to have authorized users, but the Capital One Venture X card didn't have you paying for the first 4 authorized users. And when it comes to bringing in free guests, American Express a little while back got rid of this without people having to pay a fee because of the fact of overcrowding. So I could see why Capital One would also be doing this because they also have had an issue with overcrowding. And while I think that adding a fee doesn't fully resolve the overcrowding problem, it does help it to some degree. Now to me, what was even crazier with these authorized user cards was not that they got access to the Capital One lounges and could bring in 2 guests, but they also got their own Priority Pass card and could also bring in 2 guests to a Priority Pass lounge. Capital One has to pay Priority Pass to be able to get these Priority Pass cards, and they were pretty much giving these out for free for anyone who ends up having an authorized user card. So the Venture X kind of shifted itself from just being a credit card to now a lounge card. I mean, you could have the Venture X card, never even use it except for lounges, and it could make perfect sense. The card has a $395 annual fee, and you can give out 4 authorized user cards to people who could get access to the Capital One lounge and also a Priority Pass lounge. You could just offer these cards to these people for $100 a year, and I bet you a lot of people would take access to a Capital One lounge and also a Priority Pass lounge card for $100 a year. And the person who actually has the original card, all they have to do is just redeem those 10,000 points and also use the $300 through the travel credit. So I guess technically you do have to do like 1 purchase with the card to be able to make it make sense, and you get all this value from having this card. This is way too overpowered, and anyone who's been paying just a little bit of attention, like I said in the beginning, realize that at some point this was going to end. I mean, if you're someone who doesn't have any premium travel cards, but for $100 offered you access to the Capital One lounges and also a Priority Pass card, and you got to be able to bring in 2 guests to either one of these lounges, would you take that for $100? I think a high percentage of people would, because that's how good of a deal that it is. Just looking at the lounge access is overpowered, but people are forgetting this is still a good card to have in your wallet. You get 2x back on all purchases, credits that offset the annual fee, different protections that come with this card, and also access to transfer partners. I mean, how are people not seeing that this card is in a league of its own at this moment? But in February, the lounge Congo train will change. Just like American Express, if you want to bring in a guest, you're going to have to pay a fee. And the fee is going to be $45 per person. And also that free authorized user option is no longer going to be available. You're going to have to pay $125 to get an authorized user card, at least one that ends up getting lounge access. And if those authorized user cards want to bring in guests, those guests are also going to have to pay a $45 fee. So now if you want to bring a dozen people into the Capital One Lounge, instead of having to pay the $395 for the one Venture X card, you're going to have to pay $125 for the 3 authorized user cards, coming up to $375. And then also you'd have to pay $45 for the 8 guests that you used to be able to get in for free, which would end up being $360, as a combined total coming up to being $735 to be able to bring the dozen people in. And then you also need to add in the annual fee for the original Venture X card. So I could see why people were taking full advantage of this, but ended up being really frustrated due to the fact of how much more additional cost this is as compared to where it was previously. Now, most people were not taking it to this extreme, but there definitely was a chunk of people who were just giving out authorized user cards just because they could. I almost gave my brother an authorized user card, even though he lives on the other side of the country, just because I thought, well, he doesn't even need to be loyal to Capital One. He doesn't even have any credit cards. We can end up having this card just so we can get lounge access when he decides to travel the 1 to 2 times that he does around the country. Now, I'm someone who almost did it, but there were a lot of people who actually did exactly the scenario that I'm talking about, and Capital One could probably end up seeing the data of these people who have these authorized user cards but never end up using them, but they use the cards to access the Capital One lounges. So if Capital One decides that they are going to get rid of these customers who don't use the cards for any spend, well, Capital One isn't losing anything from getting rid of these customers. If these customers want to continue to get themselves lounge access, they need to pay $125 or just apply for the Venture X card, but these customers aren't going to do this because they don't actually feel like doing business with Capital One. So if they don't end up feeling like doing business with Capital One, but they end up wanting to get the benefits of Capital One, why would Capital One want to keep these people around? American Express and Chase's premium travel credit cards both have higher annual fees than the Venture X card, and yet they are nowhere near as generous as the Capital One is currently with their lounge access. I think that Capital One did this just to make a splash when they first entered the market with their premium travel credit card. They knew that this wasn't going to end up being sustainable, but they wanted to be able to get buzz behind their card the same way that when the Chase Sapphire Reserve card first came out at a 100,000 point welcome offer that was pretty much non-existent at that time. Both Chase and Capital One understand that you need to spend money to be able to make money. And Capital One realizes that what they are currently offering for the Venture X card is just not sustainable. But for those of you who actually have a Venture X card and you're super up in arms about these changes, have you tried to access a Capital One lounge lately? Since getting the Capital One Venture X card, I've tried to access the Capital One lounge 3 times on Connections. And I've only ever accessed it 1 time because there was a line every single time that I went. And the time that I actually did get in, I still had to wait over an hour, but I was able to get in because my American Airlines flight was delayed by 3 hours, so I had plenty of time to be able to access it at DFW. Now, the Capital One lounge at DFW is really nice. But knowing that I was told that I had to wait at least an hour every single time that I tried to access a Capital One lounge can end up being really annoying for most people, and for a lot of people, not even worth it. Here's a question for the audience. For those of you who have multiple luxury travel credit cards, which one of these lounges have made you wait the most when you've tried to access it? Has it been the Chase Sapphire lounges, the Capital One lounges, or the American Express Centurion lounges? For me, I'm currently 3 of 3 with having to wait for the Capital One lounges. And while the Chase Sapphire lounges and also the Centurion lounges have made me wait before, I don't have a 100% rate of needing to wait to get into the lounge. Now, just like American Express, Capital One is offering for people to be able to get guest passes if you happen to spend $75,000 on your Venture X card. For me, this isn't something that I'm going to be doing with this card, but I do know a lot of people who just happen to have just this card and could be able to hit it. And if you're not someone who likes to bonus hunt, then it could make sense to do. The most interesting change to me is the change to Priority Pass, because before you were able to get 2 guests with your Priority Pass card that you got from your Venture X card. But now they're also getting rid of the guest passes with your Priority Pass card with the Venture X card. What I wonder from this is if this is just a sign for things to come with other premium travel cards. Because while Capital One is right now the first one to do this, I have a feeling that American Express and also Chase are going to be doing this sometime in the near future. I have no data to be able to back that up, but for Capital One to also pull guest passes for a Priority Pass, something tells me that they are renegotiating their deal with Priority Pass, and Priority Pass is asking for more money, and Capital One is just going, no, we'll just do single passes for our guest. And when it ends up coming to the time where Chase and American Express also need to renegotiate the deal with the Priority Pass cards. This is when you're going to end up seeing the changes with Chase and American Express when it comes to their guest passes with Priority Pass. This is the exact same thing that you saw when it came with the Priority Pass restaurants, where all of a sudden American Express was the first one to pull it, and then you started to see other ones pull it. It just ends up being a domino effect because all these different issuers have contracts with Priority Pass, and if Priority Pass is asking for more money, well, a lot of these different issuers can do the math to realize whether or not it makes sense or it doesn't. So while Capital One is the first, don't be surprised if you hear the same news coming from Chase and American Express not too long in the future. The interesting thing about these changes is that I still think there's going to end up being wait times when you try to access Capital One lounges. Because when American Express decided to add in a fee to be able to access the Centurion Lounge, while I imagine that it did bring down a lot of people from accessing it who are deeper into the points and miles game, there's also way more people who are not deeper into the points and miles game who went to the lounge with their spouse and just paid the fee. In fact, I can't remember the last time I've went to a Centurion Lounge where there weren't people in front of me, and then all of a sudden the person at the front desk tells the customer that they need to pay for either one or two of their guests, and that customer just pays it and they go in. It happens every single time that I go. Usually the customer seems like they're a little bit confused and they didn't know that they need to pay, but every single time I see this happening, they always end up paying and going into the lounge. I swear it has to be either 8 or 9 out of the last 10 times that I went to a Centurion Lounge where people in front of me have paid their guests to be able to get in. So while we who are the maximizers in the points and miles community may not want to do it because we don't see that it is worth it, there are a lot of people out there who would rather do that as compared to just going to a restaurant somewhere in the airport. So while we might not like that they're adding a fee, a lot of people are going to pay this fee in the same way that American Express, I feel, has made a ton of money since they've added the fee. I think that Capital One is also going to make a killing with adding in this fee. So what do I think is going to happen with these changes? Is there going to be a mass cancellation of Capital One Venture X cards? I don't think so. I think that the only mass cancellation you're going to end up seeing is going to be all of these authorized user cards that people have. They're putting zero spend on it and only have them so they can access the lounges. After February, people are going to complain that Capital One went from having the best lounge access to now the worst lounge access since you can't bring in guests with even Priority Pass. But then you end up seeing American Express and Chase not too long after that following suit and restricting guest passes for a Priority Pass as well. Again, I have zero proof that's going to end up being the case, but that's just a hunch. The Capital One lounges will become less crowded, not to the point where you can immediately access them, but they'll end up being shorter wait times than an hour every single time that you try to access it. And even with these changes, this card is still 100% worth it. Listen, if you were someone who just got this card to get the cheapest access to lounges for a large family, then sure, I would understand why you would now want to cancel the card. But if you got this card because it is a great catch-all card with a net zero annual fee that combines really well with the Saver card, then it doesn't make any sense for you to now cancel this card. I know in the credit card community, we love to see how we can maximize and take full advantage of things, but for a second stop and think how this is sustainable to keep the Capital One Venture X card the way it is for lounge access and also keep the customers happy. You could have one person paying for the card who then gets 4 authorized users who get access to the lounge, and then you could have a second person who's over here paying for the card, but this person doesn't get access to the lounge because these 4 other authorized users who are not paying any money to be able to get into the lounge now get access to the lounge. So if you were someone who has an authorized user card and you're like, oh my goodness, this stinks, I can't take advantage of this. Well, I'm someone who's paying for the card and I also can't take advantage of the lounge because of the fact that you and other people have gotten free cards and have been able to access the lounge, which is making me wait and not be able to access the lounge. Is the authorized user losing something? Yes, but they were never giving anything. So how do I feel bad that the authorized user is losing something when they weren't giving anything, where the person who has a card who is giving something has been losing out this entire time because all these authorized users have just been taking over the lounge? You may have seen one of my previous videos where I talk about where I got into the Capital One lounge, but before I got in the lounge, there was another person waiting in front of me, and this guy was yelling at the woman at the front desk, pointing at her, telling her he was going to cancel the card because he wasn't able to access it, even though he's paying for the card and he's told that it's overcrowded every single time. Now, I don't agree that you should be yelling at the woman at the front desk. This isn't her fault, but I do understand his frustration. Now, as I said earlier, I am a solo traveler, so this doesn't really affect me. But I want to hear in the comments section down below, what do you think of these changes to the Capital One Venture X card when it comes to the lounge access? Did you see it as being something that was inevitable, or were you really angry at Capital One and you're looking now to cancel your Venture X card? Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do happen to have any questions, you can drop it down in the comment section down below. I'll do the best I can to answer it. If you happen to be interested in any cards, Check my links in the description box down below to learn more. If you do decide to use any of my links, it does really help out the channel, and I'll be incredibly thankful for your support. If you want to become a Points Miles booking expert, go to Point Travel 101 to purchase my course. After completing my course, you will feel confident with booking business class and first class flights all over the world. If you happen to real like this video, do me a favor. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video, and have a beautiful day.